The wedding is in 3 weeks. Violet didn't blink. She was sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal she'd stopped eating 10 minutes ago, and Vivian was standing in the doorway in her silk robe like she was about to give a TED talk. That was Vivian's thing. She delivered news like it was already decided, already done, like your reaction was just a formality she was being polite enough to sit through. Gerald Ashworth. 61. Widowed. He has properties in Sacramento, Carmel, and downtown San Francisco, and he has expressed specific interest in you. She paused. He's willing to overlook your situation. Her situation. Violet turned the words over in her mind. Her situation was that she was 24, broke, living in her late father's house which technically now belonged to the woman standing in front of her, and holding an art history degree that had gotten her exactly one underpaid internship and a lot of polite rejections. That was the situation. And apparently the solution was a 61-year-old man with a broken front tooth and eyes that moved over her like she was something on a menu. She'd met Gerald once, briefly, at one of Vivian's dinner parties 2 months ago. The broken tooth she hadn't been able to stop staring at, jagged and grey at the edge, catching the candlelight every time he smiled. The way he'd looked at her had made her want to take 3 steps back and not stop. He'd held her hand during the introduction about 4 seconds longer than necessary, his palms soft and slightly damp, and she'd had to smile through it. I haven't agreed to anything, Violet said. Vivian tilted her head slightly. Violet. You have no job, no savings, and no other options. Gerald is a generous man and this is a good arrangement. It's not a negotiation. She smoothed her robe and turned to leave. I've already been in contact with his people. We're past the discussion stage. She walked out. Violet sat there with her soggy cereal and the sound of the house settling around her. 3 weeks. She picked up her spoon and put it back down. She needed to think. It came to her at 2 in the morning, the way her best ideas always did, suddenly, sideways, fully formed. She was lying on her bed staring at the ceiling when it hit her. Vivian needed her to marry Gerald. That was the whole game. The estate, the money, whatever legal mess her father had left behind, it all somehow ran through this arrangement that Vivian had cooked up, and Violet was the ingredient that made it work. Gerald wanted a young wife. Vivian wanted the financial security that came with keeping Gerald happy. So what if she was already married? Not to someone Vivian approved of. Not to someone who would play nice and fit into the plan. To someone who would blow the whole thing up just by existing in it. She sat up in bed. She just needed a husband. Any husband. The legal fact of one. Someone Vivian would take one look at and realize the whole plan was finished. She grabbed her phone off the nightstand. It was 2:14 a.m. She set it back down. She wasn't going to find a husband at 2 in the morning. But tomorrow was a different story. The next day, she was casually walking down the pavement in the market street and she saw the perfect guy for her plan. She hadn't been looking for anyone in particular, she'd been walking down Market Street with her headphones in, half paying attention, when she saw him standing against the wall of a closed storefront between a recycling bin and a newspaper box. Dark jacket, worn through at one elbow. Jeans that had seen better days. A paper cup in front of him. His head was slightly bowed and he wasn't doing that thing some people did, calling out or making eye contact, trying to pull people in. He was just standing there, quiet, like he had decided the world was going to do what it was going to do and he was going to be still until it did. Violet stopped walking. She pulled out one earbud and looked at him. He looked up at the change in shadowed dark eyes, Korean features, somewhere around 30 maybe, hard to tell when someone was living rough. He wasn't unkempt in the chaotic way. He was just worn. Like a person who had been managing on very little for a while and had gotten calm about it. Hi, she said. He nodded once. Cautious. She kept her gaze on him, her eyes falling to his ring finger to confirm something as she was about to do something she'd never be able to explain to anyone. People walked around them on both sides. I know this is going to sound insane, she said. And I completely understand if you say no. But I need to ask you something. He waited. He had patient eyes. I need someone to marry me. Temporarily. It's a whole thing. My stepmother is trying to force me into a marriage with someone I cannot stand, and the only way I can see to stop it is to already be married. She held his gaze. I will find us a place to live. I'll cover the rent and groceries. All you have to do is be legally married to me for about a year. Maybe less. Silence. A bus went by on the street behind her. What? He frowned. She repeated everything again, more calmly this time. Why me? He asked. His voice was low, even. American accent with something else underneath it she couldn't place. Because I need someone my stepmother is going to absolutely hate. I need someone she'd see and turn insane at how far I could go to reject her demands. Is someone coming after you? He glanced around and she shook her head immediately. No. No. No one is. Believe me. Then this must be a prank, he said with a frown. I promise it isn't. Well, do you know how weird this sounds? She swallowed and slowly nodded. The man scoffed. Are you drunk? I'm not. She said firmly. You saw someone who's no good on the street, and you thought I was beat for whatever game you're playing with your stepmom. Actually, she felt stupid, but more desperate that she ignored every other thing. She couldn't even explain. Please, she begged. Just to convince my stepmom, or else I'll be married to an old man in a few weeks. An old man that simply wants a woman he can sleep with, disrespect, and put babies in. Please help me. The man clenched his jaw. And you'd rather marry a man who has nothing? She nodded and he understood immediately that she was desperate. Something moved in his expression. Not offense, something closer to the beginning of a decision. Okay, he said. Violet blinked. Okay. Just like that. She has to be sure he understood what she meant. One condition. He looked at her steadily. No questions about my life. Where I come from, what happened, any of it. She thought about it for about 2 seconds. Deal. What's your name? He asked. Violet. What's yours? Kane. She stood up and stuck out her hand. He looked at it for a moment, then shook it. His grip was firm. His hand was cold. Okay, Kane, she said. Let's go get you cleaned up. She took him to the Target on South Van Ness because it was close and she had $211 in her checking account and needed to be strategic about it. She grabbed him 2 pairs of jeans, some basic shirts, a hoodie, socks, and a pack of simple white tees. He followed her through the store without complaining or commenting, looking at things with a kind of quiet attention that she found hard to read. Do you have a preference on anything? She asked, holding up 2 nearly identical navy shirts. No, he said. That one, he said, pointing to the left one. She put the left one in the cart. They went to her friend Kezia's apartment because Kezia was at work and had given Violet a spare key 3 years ago for emergencies. Violet figured this qualified. She showed Kane the bathroom and gave him a towel, and he showered and changed without making it into anything. When he came out he looked different. Clean. The jacket was gone, he had on the new jeans and a grey shirt, and without the context of the storefront and the paper cup he looked like someone you might sit next to on BART and not think twice about. Not like someone her stepmother would find acceptable, though. That was key. He was still obviously not from money. He had none of the things Vivian read in people, the posture, the accent, the easy confidence of someone who had grown up being told their presence was an asset. He was just a quiet, clean, good-looking man with no apparent resources and no social pedigree. Perfect. They got coffee at the place next door and she laid out the plan. She'd find them an apartment, something affordable, she'd handle the deposits, she had a credit card with enough room on it for first and last month's rent if she was careful about which neighborhood she looked in. She'd cover utilities and food. He just had to exist. Show up. Be her husband. Kane listened to all of this without interrupting. When she was done he said, "You've thought about this a lot for something you decided this morning." "I think fast under pressure," she said. He looked like he almost smiled at that. It took 8 days to get the license and schedule the ceremony. In the meantime, Violet found a 1-bedroom apartment in the outer Sunset, small, affordable, on the 2nd floor of a building that smelled like the ocean because it was only 6 blocks from the beach. First month, last month, and deposit cleaned out her credit card and most of her savings, but she did it. She signed the lease on a Thursday. She put both their names on it. Kane had said almost nothing about the apartment when she'd shown him photos. Just looked at them and said, "That works." She found that she didn't mind. He was easy to be around in a way she hadn't expected, not filling silence with noise, not making demands, just present. It was a different thing from being invisible. It was more like he was conserving something. The wedding was on a Tuesday. Civic Center, same clerk's office that processed a dozen of these a day. Violet wore a white button-down tucked into dark jeans because she refused to let this be a thing she dressed up for. Kane wore the grey shirt she'd bought him and looked calm. The clerk read them the standard language, asked the standard questions, and they both said yes in a room that smelled like old paper and air conditioning. Outside afterward, standing in the pale afternoon sun, Violet said, "Okay. Now comes the fun part." "Bringing me home," Kane said. "Bringing you home," she confirmed. He looked at her for a moment. How bad is she going to be? Violet thought about Vivian in her silk robe delivering the news like a verdict. "Bad," she said. "But that's the whole point." They stopped at their apartment and got ready before stepping out a while later. Violet called ahead. That was intentional. She wanted Vivian to have time to be in the living room, composed, ready. She wanted the full reaction, not the caught-off-guard version. She wanted Vivian to look at Kane and understand immediately that the plan was over. "I have someone I want you to meet," Violet said on the phone. "I'll be there in an hour." She could hear Vivian's interest sharpen. "Oh, my husband," Violet said, and hung up. She let Kane take a minute in the car before they went in. "You don't have to say much," she told him. "She's going to do most of the talking anyway." "What do I do?" he asked. "Just stand next to me and exist." He nodded. She got the feeling he was genuinely unbothered, which helped. Vivian opened the door before they even knocked. She'd dressed, actually dressed, put on heels and a blazer, like she'd been expecting someone worth impressing. Her eyes went from Violet to Kane and stayed there. The silence lasted about 4 full seconds. Vivian's expression moved through several things very quickly: confusion, assessment, and then something that settled into a particular kind of tight-lipped, controlled fury that Violet recognized as the thing Vivian did when she was too angry to perform politeness and too proud to drop it entirely. "Come in," she said, her voice perfectly level. They came in. Vivian gestured them toward the living room and sat across from them like this was a business meeting. She looked at Kane with the expression she used on things she found beneath her, measured, slightly cold, eyes moving over him in a way that catalogued everything that wasn't there. The watch he wasn't wearing. The car they hadn't arrived in. The haircut that was fine but not expensive. "Violet," she said, not looking at Violet, "why don't you tell me about this?" "We got married on Tuesday," Violet said. "His name is Kane. He's my husband." Vivian finally looked at her. "You got married?" "Yes." "To this man?" "To my husband, yes." Vivian took a breath through her nose. She turned to Kane with a smile that didn't reach anything above her mouth. "Kane, what is it that you do?" Kane looked at her evenly. "I'm between things right now." The smile didn't move. "I see. And where are you living?" "With me," Violet said. "I got us an apartment. Outer Sunset." Something flashed across Vivian's face. "You got the apartment?" "Yes." Vivian stood up. She smoothed the front of her blazer with both hands, her tell, the thing she did when she was past pleasantries. "Violet, can I speak with you in the kitchen for a moment?" Violet looked at Kane. He gave her the smallest nod. She followed Vivian into the kitchen. The door had barely swung shut when Vivian turned around. She dropped the composed voice entirely. "What is wrong with you? Who is that man? Where did you even find him?" "He's my husband," Violet said. "He has nothing, Violet. Nothing. You can see it on him." "I know. Gerald Ashworth is worth." "I don't care what Gerald is worth," Violet said. "Gerald is 61 years old and he looks at me like I'm something he found on a shelf. I'm not marrying Gerald. I'm already married." She kept her voice steady. "There's nothing left to discuss." Vivian stared at her. Her jaw was tight. "This isn't legal. You can't just." "It's completely legal." We have a marriage certificate from the city and county of San Francisco dated 4 days ago. Violet picked up her bag from the counter. We're leaving now. I'll come by for the rest of my things this weekend. She walked back to the living room. Kane stood up when she came back in, which she hadn't expected and which, for some reason, made her feel steadier. We're done here, she said. They walked out. Behind them, Violet heard Vivian's heels on the hardwood and then nothing. The door closed. On the sidewalk, Kane said, "That went about how I expected." "Same," Violet said. "It's not over, though. She's just regrouping." "I know," he said. He said it like he had experience with people regrouping. The outer Sunset apartment was small and smelled faintly of salt from the ocean nearby and strongly of whatever the previous tenant had been cooking. Violet had furnished it fast and cheap, a bed frame and mattress from Facebook Marketplace, a couch from a secondhand place on Irving, a kitchen table that wobbled slightly on one side and that she'd fixed with a folded cardboard square. She'd been embarrassed showing it to Kane at first, expecting him to say something. He didn't. He put his one bag in the corner of the bedroom and looked around the space and said, "It's good." She slept on the couch the first 2 nights. On the 3rd night she said, "This is ridiculous, it's a queen bed," and he agreed and they worked out a perfectly sensible arrangement where they each stayed on their side and it wasn't weird. Or it was a little weird. But manageable. She noticed things about him slowly. He was clean not just after the shower, but consistently, carefully so, which surprised her about someone who had been living on the street. He made the bed every morning, tightly and neatly, like it mattered. He washed dishes immediately after using them. He moved through the apartment with a kind of precision, like he was always aware of where he was in space. He cooked, which she hadn't expected. Simple stuff at first: eggs, rice, basic stir-fry. But then one evening she came home from an interview at a gallery downtown to find actual food on the table. Real food. A Korean stew that smelled incredible and had clearly taken time. "You can cook," she said. "Yes," he said. "You never said that. You didn't ask." She sat down. She ate. It was the best thing she'd eaten in months and she told him so. He looked like he filed the information away somewhere. They talked more as the days went on. Not about the big things, he never brought up his past and she held to her end of the deal, but about small ones. The pigeons that congregated on the fire escape every morning. Whether the wobble in the kitchen table was fixable. A documentary she'd been watching about a forger who fooled the entire art world for 20 years, which he had opinions about. He got caught because he got confident, Kane said. He got caught because someone looked closely, Violet said. Same thing, Kane said. Confidence makes you stop managing the details. She looked at him across the table. That's a very specific way to think about it. He shrugged slightly and went back to eating. The text came 6 days after the visit. Vivian, I think we should talk about the reality of your situation without emotions getting in the way. Violet showed it to Kane. He read it, handed the phone back, and said nothing. She texted back, there's nothing to talk about. 3 days after that, a man she didn't recognize knocked on the apartment door while Kane was out. He introduced himself with a vague title, something like estate consultant, and said he was acting on behalf of Vivian regarding certain complications with her father's estate. He had a folder. He wanted to come in. Violet told him her husband would need to be present for any conversations about legal or financial matters and closed the door. She called Kane. Vivian sent someone to the apartment. A pause. What kind of someone? Someone with a folder and a vague job title. Don't open the door again if he comes back. His voice was calm. Not alarmed, just certain. Okay, she said. Are you all right? I'm fine. I'll be back in an hour. He was back in 40 minutes. He didn't explain where he'd been. She didn't ask. The third stage came 2 weeks later, when Gerald Ashworth himself called her cell. She stared at his name on the screen for 5 full seconds before she answered. Violet. His voice was smooth and slow and made her skin feel wrong. I think there's been a misunderstanding that I'd like to clear up. There hasn't been, she said. You're a smart girl. I can appreciate initiative. She could hear the smile in his voice, the broken-toothed smile, and she wanted to hang up immediately. But whatever this arrangement is, it won't hold. A man with nothing can be removed from the picture. That's just the reality of how these things work. Violet's hand tightened on the phone. "Don't call me again," she said, and hung up. She sat on the couch for a minute. Then she went and told Kane. He listened. His face didn't change much, but something behind his eyes did, something that sharpened and went still at the same time. "He said I could be removed," Kane said. Those were his words. Kane was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Okay. Just okay." Like a decision being filed. It was a Sunday morning, a month into the arrangement. Kane had gone out early, he did that sometimes, early morning walks, and he never said where and she never asked. Violet was looking for the building's utility account number because the electric bill had a question about it, and she thought she'd seen Kane put some paperwork in the kitchen drawer. She opened the drawer. There were a few papers, some mail, a pen, a takeout menu. And underneath everything, a small leather document wallet. The kind that held passports and ID cards. She picked it up without thinking and flipped it open. The passport on top was American. The photo was Kane, younger, a little, but definitely Kane. She looked at the name. It didn't say Kane Anthony or anything she recognized. It said Kane Seo. The name underneath was followed by a date of birth and a list of countries she recognized from business news: South Korea, Japan, Singapore, UAE. She put it back. She closed the drawer. She stood in the kitchen for a while. The coffee maker finished its cycle. She poured herself a cup and sat at the wobbling table. She pulled out her phone and typed the name into Google. Kane Seo. The results loaded. She scrolled. Her coffee went cold. Kane Seo, 31, heir to Seo Group, a South Korean conglomerate with holdings in technology, infrastructure, real estate, and private equity across 12 countries. Kane Seo, described in a 2022 Forbes profile as one of the most significant under 40 business figures in the Asia-Pacific region. Kane Seo, who had disappeared from public life approximately 14 months ago, prompting significant speculation in Korean business media. Kane Seo, whose family, specifically his father, Seo Dae-han, chairman of Seo Group, had reportedly been in active contact with international private search firms. She put her phone face down on the table. She got up and poured her cold coffee down the sink and made a fresh cup. She thought about the way he made the bed every morning like it was a discipline. The Korean stew that had taken 2 hours. The way he'd said confidence makes you stop managing the details, like someone who had learned that from the inside. The way he'd gone completely still when she told him Gerald said he could be removed from the picture. He wasn't hiding from the street. He was hiding from a boardroom. She heard the key in the lock. Kane came in with a brown paper bag from the bakery 2 blocks over. He'd started doing that on Sunday mornings, just showing up with pastries without making it into anything. He set the bag on the counter and looked at her face and went still. "You found something," he said. "I found your passport," she said. "I was looking for a utility number. I wasn't snooping." "I know." He stayed where he was by the counter. "I'm not angry." "Kane Seo," she said. He looked at her steadily. "Yes." "Seo Group." "Yes." She put her hands flat on the table. She'd decided on the tone she was going to take, calm, direct, no performance. "Why?" she asked. "Why were you sitting on Market Street in a worn-out jacket with a paper cup?" He came and sat at the table across from her. He was quiet for a moment, and it was the kind of quiet where she could tell he was actually deciding how honest to be. "My father," he said finally. "He runs the family company the way he's run everything, his way, fully, no input, no deviation. I've been next in line my whole life. Every decision I've ever made has been inside the frame he built." He looked at the table. 2 years ago he arranged a merger that required my marriage to the daughter of the other family. I said no. He went ahead with the merger anyway and told the press the engagement was proceeding. He paused. "I left." "You left," Violet said. "And came to San Francisco. It was the 4th city. I needed to know what it felt like to be somewhere without my name doing anything. Without money doing anything." He looked up at her. "I know how that sounds. A rich kid playing at being poor. I know that's not the same as actually having nothing. No, she said. It's not. I know, he said. He didn't try to defend it. She was quiet for a moment. Were you ever actually in trouble? Like, did you actually need anything? No. I had accounts no one knew about. A phone I didn't use. I wasn't in danger. He held her gaze. When you sat down next to me on that bench and offered me a deal, I could have said no. I had a hotel room 6 blocks away. Violet stared at him. You had a hotel room? Yes. While you were sitting on the street with a paper cup. The cup was a prop, he said. I know how that sounds. It sounds. She stopped. She looked at the pastry bag on the counter. She thought about the $37 apartment food budget she had been managing for the past month. She thought about the couch she had slept on for 2 nights because she thought he needed space. She pressed her lips together and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Violet, he said. Give me a second, she said. She took the second. Then she looked back at him. Okay. Why did you say yes to me? He didn't hesitate. Because you were the first person in months who looked at me and saw a problem to solve instead of an opportunity to take. He said it simply, like it was just a fact. You weren't performing anything. You just needed something and you asked for it. I haven't had a lot of that. She thought about that. You could have told me. I know. You had conditions. No questions about your life. I kept that. You did. So you could have, at some point, returned the honesty. Yes, he said. I should have. I'm telling you now. She looked at him for a long moment. He didn't look away. He also didn't try to fill the silence with justifications or apologies, which she appreciated more than she expected to. The thing with Gerald, she said. Him saying you could be removed. You said okay. Just okay. Yes. What does that mean, exactly, for a man who owns significant portions of multiple countries? For the first time in the whole conversation, something shifted in his expression. Not a smile, something quieter than that. It means Gerald Ashworth is going to have a very clarifying few days, he said. She didn't see exactly what happened. She didn't need to. What she knew was, Kane, also Kane Seo, made one phone call the next morning, in Korean, standing at the kitchen window while she was still in bed. It lasted 4 minutes. His voice was low and completely even throughout, which was somehow more intimidating than if he'd been loud. What happened after that, she pieced together in pieces. Gerald Ashworth's attorneys contacted Vivian's attorneys and withdrew from every discussion involving the estate. Permanently, in writing, with language that made it clear the matter was closed. No explanation was given and none was apparently needed. The estate consultant with the folder did not come back to the apartment. Vivian called twice. Violet didn't answer the first time. The second time she picked up, and Vivian's voice was different, not the tight controlled fury of the living room visit, not the performance of composure. Just quieter. Smaller. I need to understand what is happening, Vivian said. My husband handled it, Violet said. It's done. A long silence. Who is he? Vivian asked. My husband, Violet said. That's who he is. She hung up. Part 12. What it actually was. The conversation that mattered happened that same evening, quietly, at the wobbly kitchen table. Kane had cooked again. Something with noodles and soft boiled eggs. He put it on the table without ceremony and sat down and they ate for a few minutes before either of them said anything. I want to ask you something, Violet said. Okay. This whole time, the apartment, the food budget, the couch, were you just going along with it because you felt bad? Like, as a rich person guilt thing? He shook his head. No. Then what was it? He turned his chopsticks over in his hand once, looking at them, and then looked up at her. It was the first time in a long time that I had a life that was just mine. Small, real, nobody looking. You made that possible. The grocery budget, the secondhand furniture, the wobbly table. He tapped the corner of the table that wobbled. I wasn't humoring you. I was grateful for it. Violet looked at the table. She thought about the art history degree and the failed internship applications and the version of her life she'd been trying to build in the margins of the one Vivian had been designing for her. She thought about sitting on that bench by the water and looking at a stranger and deciding on the craziest possible plan. "The table wobbles because I can't afford a better one," she said. "I know. I like it anyway." She looked at him. "I don't want your money. I know that too. I'm just saying it clearly. I know. And I'm not offering it." He held her gaze. "I'm not going anywhere either. If you want me to be." She was quiet for a moment. The apartment hummed around them, the refrigerator, the sound of the street below, the seagulls somewhere in the direction of the ocean. "I need to think about all of this," she said. "That's fair," he said. And then he went back to eating, and she went back to eating, and the table wobbled a little when she reached for her water, and neither of them said anything else. But she was thinking. She thought about it for 3 days. She kept going to work, kept coming home, kept having dinner with him and watching him do the dishes immediately after and make the bed in the morning like it was a discipline. On the 3rd day she came home to find him on the floor of the living room with a screwdriver and the wobbling table turned upside down. He was fixing the leg. Quietly, methodically, like it was just a thing that needed doing. She stood in the doorway and watched him for a minute. She thought about Gerald's damp hand. She thought about Vivian delivering her future like a verdict. She thought about sitting on a bench by the water and looking at a man she thought had nothing and deciding he was the safest option she had. She thought about the fact that she had been right about that. Not because of what he had, she hadn't known any of that, but because of what he was. The stillness. The precision. The way he had never once made her feel like a situation to be managed. "Hey," she said. He looked up. "I'm done thinking." He waited. "I don't want an end date," she said. "And I don't want your money. And I'd like you to stay." He looked at her for a moment. Then he set the screwdriver down on the floor and said, "I want to stay with you," he said with a look as deep and dark. The table stopped wobbling. "Kane," she kept calling him Kane, he said he preferred it. He told his father eventually. Not immediately, not with fanfare, a phone call one Sunday evening while Violet sat in the other room trying to pretend she wasn't listening. It was long and she could hear the cadence of argument in it even through the Korean she couldn't understand. When he came back out his face was tired but settled. He sat down on the couch next to her. "He's angry," he said. "Okay," she said. "He'll stop being angry eventually." "Okay." He looked at her. "You're not worried?" "I married a man I found on Market Street," she said. "I've recalibrated my worry threshold significantly." He did the exhale thing that was his version of a laugh, and she felt it in her chest. The estate situation resolved itself. There had been some outstanding debts from her father, some claims Vivian had been trying to maneuver around, none of which turned out to be as complicated as Vivian had made them seem once actual lawyers were involved. Violet's lawyer was very good. She didn't ask where Kane had found him. She got the full-time position at the gallery 6 months later, assistant curator, actual creative control, the kind of job she'd been trying to build toward since the internship that hadn't led anywhere. She came home that evening and told Kane, and he made her the Korean stew that had been the first sign she should have been paying closer attention. They stayed in the outer Sunset apartment for another year after that. She liked the sound of the ocean. He liked the table, even after he fixed it. They eventually moved somewhere slightly bigger, slightly closer to the park, with a kitchen that had enough counter space to actually cook in, but they took the table with them. On a warm afternoon, they both stood in the middle of the living room as he just arrived from somewhere. They snuggled and a smile tipped his lips as he pressed a kiss to her lips. This wasn't a story she'd tell people in full, ever. Too many pieces that required context. But sometimes she thought about the night she lay in Vivian's house staring at the ceiling and the idea that came in sideways at 2 in the morning, and she thought about walking down Market Street with her headphones in, and the man sitting quietly against the wall with a paper cup and patient eyes. She'd thought she was using him. Turns out they'd both been finding something. She just hadn't known what she was looking for until she found it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more thrilling stories.